On July 25th last year, more than 230,000 flights went to the skies, making it the busiest day in aviation history. And it's predicted that by 2037, demand for air travel will only double again. So while aviation is a massive hot-button issue in terms of sustainability, it's safe to say that it's not going away. We are going to keep flying. We need to get around the world, and it makes it a better place when we do. An airline that's been very proactive about the issue is the UAE's national carrier, Etihad. Last January, they piloted a flight from Abu Dhabi to Amsterdam that was partially powered by locally made biofuel derived from plants grown in saltwater. In April, they conducted the first single-use plastic-free ultra-long-haul flight from Abu Dhabi to Brisbane. And this week, to celebrate the Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week, they turned a flight from Abu Dhabi to Brussels into a further experiment. So we're very lucky to have the airline CEO, Tony Douglas, here to discuss the transportation revolution. Welcome, Tony. First off, a very basic but important question. Why should aviation companies aim to be more green?
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Sabah al-Khair, good morning. I think it's sometimes quite unusual to see representatives of the aviation sector engaged in forums of this nature. Etihad is a relatively young company. We're 16 years of age. So I guess, like the earlier panelists, we're the youth movement when it comes to embracing the challenges that come within the aviation sector. As you already mentioned, most of the global analysts that cover this space forecast that demand for air travel will double over the next 15 or 20 years. So on that basis, clearly, the problem won't go away. However, I think there's a firm believer in the ingenuity of mankind and the acknowledgement of problems. There's always solutions. And I guess I'd start with the first very open admission. I and Etihad, we don't believe that there's a silver bullet that gives one very crisp, definitive answer to how we become completely carbon neutral overnight. However, the headline for us this morning is Etihad Aviation Group is committing openly and publicly today to a target of being completely carbon neutral as an airline by 2050. Thank you, sir. We're going further than that, however, and making it quite clear that on that journey, we will reduce our carbon emissions by 50% by 2035 from the emissions that we contributed in 2019. And moreover, I guess, people quite rightly will say, well, let's make sure this isn't a corporate greenwashing exercise, a tick box process. We've also published today, and my only one prop is the Towards Sustainable Aviation paper. We've published this white paper today, and it's available online through etihad.com. So it lays out the details around how we will commit openly and publicly to achieving carbon neutrality. And the Greenliner is a very important part of that strategy.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the Greenliner as a test tool? What are things about it that might surprise us?
So you rightly pointed out earlier on that this time last year, I remember we were on the other side of ADNEC and we made the announcement of our first flight to Amsterdam, which was a biofuel flight in partnership with ADNOC, Khalifa University, General Electric, and ourselves. We've moved on a lot since then, and it's matured not only till the Monday flight of this week to Brussels, which was an eco flight that not only looked at optimizing fuel burn by working with Eurocontrol air traffic and also the air traffic control authorities here to have what is described as a continuous ascent, as opposed to most aircraft climb, level out, burn more fuel, climb, level out, and more importantly on the descent, a continuous descent pattern. Most airlines, most air traffic control plans have the descent, then you level out, descend, level out, burns a lot more fuel. So the significance of Monday's eco flight was we had continuous ascent and continuous descent, saved a huge amount of fuel, obviously beneficial then on CO2 emission. We also went again for a non-single-use plastic flight. So we took out all of the plastics which are single-use and therefore clearly so damaging to the broader environment. But to the Greenliner is a persona. It's not about Etihad. It's about acknowledging that a testbed that can allow many of these separate initiatives all to be joined together on the Greenliner to try and find ever more innovative ways in allowing that target of complete carbon neutrality by 2050 to be achieved. The Greenliner is Boeing. It's a 787 Dreamliner. The Dreamliner itself is at least 15% more fuel efficient than any aircraft that came before it. We're working with GE, the engine manufacturers, and ourselves. So many of you in the audience might be sitting there and thinking, okay, it's all about the big guys, but of course that's not the case. So the example I used earlier on about eliminating single-use plastics, i.e. the knives and forks even, the cups that we drink on board with. It's easy to eliminate them and put glass for drinking and steel for knives and forks. But if I use that very simple example, we've solved one problem with single-use plastics.
Yeah.
But because steel and glass is heavier, we've created a far bigger problem because weight means more fuel burn. The whole idea of the Greenliner is we're reaching out to everybody, again, like a youth movement, that if you, for example, have a genius idea on what you can do to reduce the single-use plastic cutlery with a new innovative product that doesn't come with a weight penalty, then we want you to become part of the Greenliner movement as well.
An open invitation.
It's a very open invitation.
So there are certainly hot-button sustainability topics when it comes to aviation, fuel, single-use plastics. A lot of people talk about that. But what are some other areas of the operation that you've found have a huge potential impact that have surprised you?
Okay. So I think we'd all acknowledge that the aviation industry is quite rightly the whipping boy when it comes to carbon emissions. We've got nowhere to hide. So it's about embracing what we can do collaboratively to do things differently. I've already said we don't believe that there's a silver bullet, there's one single answer. It's about collaborating, it's about innovating, it's about connecting the many dots that are already around us and therefore innovating to find additional ones to find that collective solution. But if I give an example of something that I believe that is a legacy issue, is the kind of roadways, the highways in the sky. So for those of you who've got an app on your phone called Flight Radar, if not, it's good fun anyway to download. It shows all the aircraft that are in the sky at any one time.
It can look frighteningly busy.
It looks frighteningly busy, and it will probably get busier going forward, as we discussed earlier. But the roads in the sky were designed decades and decades and decades ago. So the analogy I would use, it's like almost the roads that were designed in London 200 years ago, when nobody imagined 200 years later the mode of transport and the volume of transport. There's a big opportunity in the reorganization of the roads in the sky to take the shortest possible routes in the most organized way, which in turn will reduce the amount of fuel that's burnt, which of course therefore impacts the CO2 emissions. So something that theoretically sounds simple actually requires governments, civil aviation authorities, and our industry to work together
globally,
in acknowledging the fact that there is a sizable prize to be had that no one individual in isolation is able to achieve. And the green liner, again, it's almost, again, it's a call to arms. It's a story that allows us to think about things in a different way. And we're hoping that the energy around the green liner, not only with the open invitation, brings more people to want to bring their ideas and their genius to bear on that test bed, but almost calling out at the higher level governments and other critical stakeholders as how we can crack this problem together.
So can you see the highway and the sky changing in the near future, or do you think it's going to take?
Realistically, it's going to take time because the Roman roads, so to speak, which have been there for a long time, will take many careful considerations to realign. And because it's a system, you can't fix some parts in isolation. But the flight that we did to Brussels on Monday that I referred to earlier was one of many examples about how you pick this one off in bite-sized pieces, and all the bites count.
Every bite counts. I'm a New Zealander. I live very far away. It takes me a long time to get there. I feel like I have a vested interest in flying, getting quicker. Can you see a future that's fast and green? How do you balance innovation and sustainability? Because surely it can be a tricky balance.
Okay, well, first of all, I think you live in one of the most beautiful countries in the world, and a country that's got an incredible sustainability record and culture. Look, my crystal ball is no better calibrated than anybody else's in the room. So I'm not sure whether I've got a crisp answer, other than to say, like many other people, I look at trends. And I think if one looks over the last 30 years and therefore perhaps uses that as a segue to consider 30 to 50 years in the future, I would predict, looking at trends, that travel and transport will become quicker, because that trend has definitely been the case in the previous half generation. I believe it will definitely become far, far, far more sustainable for all the reasons that we have talked about. I also believe that the aircraft industry itself, Boeing, Airbus, Rolls-Royce, GE, Pratt & Whitney, for example, are all working tirelessly on finding new and more innovative materials and form of power. So if somebody were to say to me from the audience, Tony, do you believe we will see electric-powered aircraft? I would say they're already here. But they're currently only here in very small-scale applications. But like all small acorns, they grow into big trees over time. And I think there's therefore technology pathways that will contribute. And therefore, back to the crystal ball that isn't well calibrated, my sense would be, again, it will be a combination of things as opposed to one single bullet. But my prediction, I will give you one. You will be able to travel to New Zealand more quickly. And it will be carbon neutral.
That's great.
Remember where you heard that first.
By 2050.
By 2050.
And what opportunities will the new terminal, the new midfield terminal in Abu Dhabi offer in terms of innovation? Obviously, we talk a lot about the in-the-sky experience, but how is the on-the-ground experience key? In terms of
so it's a great question. Very shortly, Abu Dhabi will open what I passionately believe to be the finest airport terminal in the world. It will be the first impression of new visitors to the Emirate of Abu Dhabi that will demonstrate what this incredible capital city stands for. But it's been designed also as an environmental statement. So things such as all of the contact stands have fixed electrical ground power, so we won't be burning fuel when we've parked up. Now, some people would say, well, that happens in many places all around the world now, but here it will be 100%. All of the air conditioning is actually provided from the terminal that then goes onto the aircraft. So as we all know, Abu Dhabi can get quite warm in the summer. Historically, places in this part of the world have auxiliary power units on aircraft burning jet fuel in order to keep the cabin temperature low. All of that was designed into the terminal from the get-go. All of the water inside the terminal is reusable, for example. The energy coefficient of it was in line with an Estadama, a sustainability target that was laid down by the wise leadership of Abu Dhabi to make sure that we were building for the future generations, taking into account some of the challenges of the past. So the new terminal in Abu Dhabi, I believe, will be a key addition to our overall commitment to sustainable aviation. And I think my final plug again would be to the white paper that we're publishing online today on Etihad.com, which lays out our commitment in detail to how we'll get to being a carbon neutral airline by 2050.
Great. Thank you so much for joining me, Tony. And I look forward to getting to New Zealand very quickly soon. Thank you.